Hey guys, it's Glitchy here. So it has been a while since I posted, and the 2D platformer was not going to be Silksong, but after recording all of the footage for what was going to be a Sonic 3 and Knuckles video, and writing the script, I absolutely hated how it turned out. So that combined with moving and everything else life has to offer, I kind of entered a slump where I didn't really know what kind of video to make. Then, in the time I was gone, Silksong got a release date, then basically immediately released. Now I have about 34 hours in the game and have gotten the true ending. I won't be going into spoilers in this video, or probably ever, but I wanted to give my thoughts just because I feel extremely divided on this game, especially when I compare it to the first game. So this is going to be split into separate parts, starting with everything I like, then everything I'm mixed on, and then everything I genuinely just dislike. Unfortunately, the stuff I like is going to be much less in depth than the stuff I dislike because, I mean, what else is there to say about the stuff I like besides just endless compliments? So, starting out with the positives, the art style in this game is absolutely insane. Also, this is something I definitely liked in the first game as well, and it is kind of a staple in modern Metroidvanias, but every single area in this game has its own feel, an entire ecosystem. There are almost never enemies in one area that will show up in another, and the few that do are reskinned to fit the area's theme so much more. The game has like 230 enemy types, including all the bosses, which is fucking crazy to think about when all the characters and animations are completely hand-drawn, including all the backgrounds and foregrounds. It makes sense how all of this took 7 years to make, even considering the coding. In interviews explaining why Silksong even took so long, they said it could have been out a lot sooner, but they were just having way too much fun making the game, so they kept adding more and more, which makes sense. This game is basically double the length of the first game as well, and I will say a part of the art in this game is going to be the music, and this game's music stands out so much more to me personally than the first games did. I'll probably have some of my favorite tracks playing in the background of this video, but so many of the first game's tracks that I personally enjoyed were a lot of just the boss tracks. Some of the game's music, just for background music, is just fucking flawless, I feel like. And they feel so unique to this game. Like, none of the tracks in this game I feel like could be reused for the first Hollow Knight. And there aren't a lot of tracks in the first Hollow Knight that I feel like could get used here, or at least be reused in some way. And something else that I love that kind of relates to both of these is the vibes in this game are immaculate. There is some magic when it comes to this game, where Silksong masters this art of showing absolute desolation where it needs to, while also kind of showing you pure hope and beauty through the music, as well as the areas you'll be exploring. Late into the game, without getting into too many spoilers, there's something that happens that transforms the world that makes everything have an absolute feeling of loss and just pure darkness, with ambience in the background and specific areas that makes you feel the weight of the end of the game, basically waiting for you to get there, constantly beckoning you to the end and reminding you, I'm still here, God, come and get me. But all of this only plays into how the game feels from a visual standpoint, which is going to lead to chapter 2 of this video. So now we can get into things I'm pretty iffy on, which is unfortunate that a game took 7 years to make, and as hyped as it was, that I have to feel iffy on absolutely anything. But I don't want to insult the devs, as they are literally 3 people that have crafted something I could never even dream of beginning to learn how to make, but holy shit. The gameplay, in my opinion, is a complete hit or miss depending on how familiar you are with the original Hollow Knight's gameplay. Hornet feels so sluggish even when you have an ability like the dash, as well as most of the movement abilities in this game. I played the game with a controller, as I imagine most people probably are, and there have been a lot of moments where I question if my controller was bugging the fuck out or not. And some of the movement feels absolutely horrendous. The game not accepting inputs when platforming or in fights have gotten me killed a large number of times, but when you are in a flow and everything is working as intended, it feels like heaven. Sometimes being even better than the original Hollow Knight. Now, notice that I did in fact say sometimes, because most of the time, in my opinion, the game feels very poor compared to the original. When it comes to combat, especially since there is a new system that can change your attack patterns as well as your main way of platforming. This system is known as the crests in the game, and this also acts as your charm system from the first game, where instead of charms you have different tools. Now this in particular I have extremely mixed feelings on, because I personally really liked how the first game would allow charms to affect your gameplay with a simple set limit of charms that you were allowed to equip. In this game, the crests only allow you to equip specific tools of a specific type, as well as giving you a new ability and type of attack with your nail. Unfortunately, most of the crests really fucking suck, in my opinion. I wish Team Cherry would have just allowed the complete customization of Hornet's abilities, where you can unlock the different types of nails being separate from the crest, so then you can get the unique abilities while also having the unique weapons. And instead of having a set limit on the specific type of tools, you could just have specific limits on how many tools in general you can equip. Like for most of the game, I had the Reaper crest equipped, so the entire game I was only playing with 2 red tools, 2 blue tools, and 2 yellow tools. Red tools consist of damage-dealing weapons, yellow are like utilities like the compass from the first game, and the blue tools are items that give you different status effects or immunities and buffs. Another issue I have with these, as much fun as some of them can be, is that most of them are completely useless. While some of them can be great when combined with other things, and then there are some almost definitive tools that you are always going to be using in basically any build, and you were going to see them all over those build videos for Silksong. The crests are so dire, they can, and depending on what crest you're using, will decide if you either get through certain encounters, as well as will definitely affect your platforming experience. Now, since I got the Reaper crest so early in the game, that was basically the way that I experienced most of the game, and it was one of the best crests I had found out. It felt fairly similar to the first Hollow Knight, but there was a delay whenever you try to do one of the downwards attacks, especially when, like, platforming. Trying to pogo off of anything almost felt impossible at some points. If you want the most similar experience as Hollow Knight in Silksong, then use the Wanderer crest, as it is literally exactly how the first game felt, just as an ability set. I think for the most part this covers my biggest mixed issues with the gameplay, as these were mostly personal gripes compared to stuff I believe that most people are going to be having issues with. I think this has been easily the most divisive part of the game for basically the entire community for Hollow Knight. Silksong is hard. Like, really, really fucking hard. This game genuinely feels like it is constantly trying to curb stomp you as you are just barely getting away from the game's descending foot. It doesn't help that there are issues with the input, that the game feels weighed against you, since you basically have no guarantee that the game is going to slap your ass unfairly. I could not count how many times I got to watch Hornet's nail go through an enemy, only to not count the damage towards said enemy, while the enemy wouldn't even fucking touch me, yet I would still take damage. The game feels extremely unfair at points in which it simply feels like it was designed to be as irritating as physically possible, which I don't know why, but Team Cherry only had 2 playtesters on the team. I guarantee if they had any more, the game would feel 10 times more different, as the balance would actually be that. Balanced. There is also absolutely no reason as to why almost every single enemy has an attack that has 2 masks worth of damage, when in the first game there was barely any, besides in the late game, or larger enemies you should know better to avoid doing the same. It is such a constant issue in Silksong that you will find yourself running back to benches to heal, or running through crowds because you simply cannot afford to take any damage when you are on the way to your destination, which on some of the runbacks to the bosses, which I have one specific one in mind, will make you want to pull your hair out. There is one section in the mid-game where you have to run 5 minutes through one of the most tedious platforming sections to even attempt to fight the boss of the area. The boss also has an arena-style encounter where you have to fight some of the most irritating enemies before you even get to fight the main boss. It feels so unnecessarily cruel and broke me to the point where I just decided to install a mod that makes it so that whenever you die, you'll just spawn at the beginning of the entrance of the room that you were currently in. If I have to install a mod to make the game more bearable to play, there is something wrong with how your game is fundamentally designed. The way the game is built feels as if you aren't just being challenged, you are being simply demanded to put up with absolute bullshit for the pure entertainment of the developers. This, along with some, definitely nowhere near the majority of required bosses, having attacks that are not telegraphed correctly, it can truly make for an absolutely infuriating experience. An area known as Bilewater almost completely ruined the game for me at a specific point. It left a completely sour taste in my mouth until I got to the third act of the game. It truly feels like most of the game's unavoidable issues would have been ironed out if they simply had more people to tell them that what they were peddling out was a bit too hard when compared to the first game. When I played through Hollow Knight for the first time, I got majorly stuck on 2 bosses in the entire experience, being Radiance and Traitor Lord. But even with those, I could clearly see the mistake I was making and was able to overcome them through practice at some point. Which, don't get me wrong, some of the best bosses in this game are also really fucking hard while being extremely fun like the first game, but it's because they can actually be learned. They don't have issues that persist past the moveset that the player can actually work around. Some of my personal favorites, in no particular order, being Last Judge, Cogwork Dancers, and Lace. All of these feel like insurmountable mountains when you first fight them, but you can actually overcome them with time and patience. There are some bosses in this game that genuinely feel like you get through them by sheer luck, and that is all. There is no satisfaction involved in beating them, at least when I was playing, because for the most part, I'm simply begging for the experience to be over. One of my other large issues with this game is that exploration does not feel rewarding enough. Too many times that I find myself trotting through secret pathways which I believed would lead me to a new item or some form of extra progression, where I would be met with the tool resource being scraps, which I usually had completely capped out unless I was stuck on a particularly hard boss, or an absurdly small amount of money. Which leads to an even larger issue, being the economy in this game. In the first game, every single enemy would drop in an amount of money, big or small, and unless you wanted the best items or needed it for a quest, the grind was never too much. In Silksong, it feels like every single item needs to be farmed for, which I don't feel has any place in a Metroidvania. If I am spending more time grinding for money to buy an item than I am exploring and finding items that could be useful, there is something fundamentally wrong with your Metroidvania. And that's not to say that there aren't any items or surprises to find out in the world, which, when there is, it's an absolute delight. But it is far and few between enough for me to have mentioned it in the things that I actually like about this game. Even with all this, Silksong is something that was born out of passion, out of pure creativity, and a love of a concept. These devs have done something the entirety of the games industry has been struggling for, and I can't fault them for their effort after 7 years, but I can judge it based on my experience, which made me feel absolutely horrendous for a good chunk of the game and made me feel absolute bliss and joy throughout the rest of it. There is a reason why I even finished the game and didn't get a refund. I do genuinely really like the game for a good chunk of it, but as someone who absolutely loved the first Hollow Knight for the great balance of challenging gameplay as well as its Metroidvania aspects, this game just does not do either one of those things. And they obviously agree with the fact that these are issues because their first update was nerfing specific aspects that everybody was freaking the fuck out about. It feels like they took the wrong aspects of the first game, being the really challenging bosses and absurd movesets, as well as deciding their platform system needed to be completely revamped from feeling great to feeling horrendous, by default needing a different ability to force it to how it was before. All I can ask at this point is why? What made you change the formula so much that you had to alienate your own players and want to force them to change? I feel like I'm being harsh because I still loved the game enough to want to get the true ending and make an entire video about it. But overall, I want to say I personally prefer the first game over this one. And while I still like a good portion of this game, there are an absurd amount of issues that just bring this game down for me. If I had to give it a rating, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10, maybe an 8 out of 10 if you catch me in a good mood. But I'd also recommend mods if you really want to experience this game, but do not feel confident in your ability to kind of put up with this, because there are plenty of mods now that rebalance the game to be a bit more fair on the player side. I would also only recommend this game if you thoroughly enjoyed the first game and enjoyed the challenge of some of the harder bosses in that game. Even with all my complaints, I am still excited for what Team Cherry has to offer in the future, be it DLC, a new IP, or another game in the Hollow Knight series. And I wanted to end this video off saying, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment saying what you liked and leave a like, potentially even consider subscribing. I'll catch you guys next time, which will hopefully be a lot sooner than 4 months from now.